Testing, testing. Oh.
Testing, 1, 2.
No. Hi, good evening, everyone. I just wanted to say we want to allow another 10 minutes or so just to see if other people will come. I know traffic was heavy where I came from. So if you're, please be patient. Let's hope this continues to work. Okay. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for coming out to this first town hall at Combermere to discuss the 17th actuarial report that was laid in Parliament last week. My name is Rawdon Adams. I'm the Deputy Chair of the NIS, and I'm here this evening with the Chairman of the NIS, Leslie Haynes, on my left, the CEO of the NIS, Kim Tudor, over on the other side of the table, and the independent actuary, Derek Osborne, whose firm authored this report. So I'll say a couple of things that are housekeeping really from the top. We have 2 hours allocated, 2 hours plus 10 minutes because we started a bit late. We would ask that when the time comes to questions that you are as succinct as possible so we can get through as many as possible. But outside of that, we really are here to not only inform but to learn and understand the concerns that and ideas that the public has. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Mr. Haynes to make a few opening remarks, and then I think we'll go straight into the presentation by Derek, so that you can hear the key messages as he perceives them out of that report. Thank you, Leslie.
Thanks, Rawdon. Well, firstly, good evening, all. It's a pleasure to be here. And as Rawdon said, this evening, as I understand the purpose of us being here this evening, is for, firstly, the actuary, Mr. Derek Osborne, who's all the way from the Bahamas, and he's been our actuary for how many years, Derek? About 20 years. So he knows the inside workings of the NIS. We are all stakeholders in the NIS, so he's going to inform you basically of the key points in his actuarial report and the need for action. And having done that, then we would like to hear from all present what the suggestions are, the way to go forward. In other words, I think Derek will tell you that every solution for national insurance schemes is peculiar to the country itself, so that there are different solutions, and we have to choose one that's appropriate for us. For instance, and when I say us, it's because we are all stakeholders in the national insurance scheme. I have been on the board since 2018. I've learned a little bit about national insurance, and one of the things that I've learned is that the national insurance is responsible, or really is one of the engines of growth of the economy. For instance, yes, what paper was it that I saw the headlines? Too much, the NIS has too much investments with government. That may be true. And for the last, even in the last actuarial report, Derek, Derek has always said to us that we need to, diversify, reduce our investments in government paper, move to other places. We as a board, we have been looking at that for a long time, for a fair time. The only problem with that is that for the last 2 years, from March 2020, as we were getting things together, we were hit with COVID. As a result of COVID, the national insurance scheme, I think it's fair to say that we put over $200 million into the economy. And as a member of the board, the only difference between a member of the board and chairman is the chairman has to do all the hard work to arrange meetings and set the agenda and that type of thing. But when I looked around during those 2 years, I really couldn't see the 200 million. When I pass someplace, you know, I am looking for how did we spend 200 million in the last 2 years with COVID? And my answer is that the 200 million was spent keeping Barbadians afloat. And that is where we are. So that I say that to say that we have considered as a board a number of items, but COVID was our priority in the last 2 years. I remember when COVID hit, we worked, and the management team and the staff of the National Insurance worked assiduously to ensure that we did something called the Advanced Payment Solution. I don't know if you all remember that. What it was that rather when you put in for your unemployment benefit, rather than wait the 3 months, we were paying you first and then working out the benefits after. So that, and then we went from step to step monitoring COVID and making sure that funds were there, etc. So we've been fairly busy over the last 2 years. Then now that we are, when I say recovering, yeah, I would say recovering, now that COVID is almost behind us, it's not as serious as it was before, I think, although the newspapers still reports high numbers, but we are all here, we're sitting together, that type of thing. And Derek presented us with his report, the actuarial report, and we saw the report, and you all know what the report says, but Derek will give you a presentation. That report basically told us, look, we need to find a solution, if not in about 15 years' time. If we continue the way we are, we will not have a national insurance fund to continue with our social development and social security. And that is why essentially we are here taking action early so that we can chart a new course. We are not the only national insurance scheme in this position. Derek can give you the positions of certain national insurance schemes throughout the region, and we are among the few that are charting this new course as early as possible. It's very simple. You're going to a meeting, you leave home early, you have a flat tire, you see there's an accident, and in Barbados where we have accidents on Highway 2A or on what I call the Coast Road, Highway 1A, you have to change course. And that is why we are here, because we have to change course, and the sooner we change course, the better it is for all of us. And that is why we're here, looking forward to suggestions and hearing what you all have to say. So that at the end of the day, please rest assured that all comments and suggestions made here, made at the other town hall meetings that are to take place later this week on Wednesday and Thursday. Wednesday we are going to Alexandra School in St. Peter. I'll be home early because I live in St. Peter. And on Thursday we're going to St. Philip. I already told the powers that be I need directions because I haven't been to St. Philip for years. So that is where we are. So I'll hand over now. We have, at the end of the day, we have our director from the National Insurance here with us, but I'll hand over now, and she'll be available for questions together with Rodden and myself and Derek. And I'll hand over now to Derek, who will give us a short presentation. Is it, Derek? So I'll leave that in your hands. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everybody. It's really good to be with you and to share with you, important things about your national insurance scheme. And to keep things running smoothly, many of you may have seen some of what we're going to share today. But just for repetition, we're going to go through a similar slide deck again. I'll be briefer this time, and we're going to add the options that we can discuss as we consider changes for the NIS. So I think we all know and appreciate what NIS does or is supposed to do for Barbados. As the chairman mentioned, that really was highlighted during COVID with the unemployment fund. But a simple definition we like to use for why NIS schemes exist across the region and essentially most countries in the world is a comprehensive system of social protection that reflects, in this case, Barbados' value system. It has to make sense for Barbados. It should respond to changing economic, socioeconomic conditions, so social, economic, demographic. And because NIS delivers a service to its customers, it should be satisfying customer needs, right? So comprehensive means everybody, right? And in this case, income replacement benefits. So it should cover income replacement benefits for any cause of loss of income. It should cover everybody in the population. It should represent Barbados' value system. It should respond to changing conditions and provide great customer service. And of course, as a benefit system, people always want more. But we have to balance more with cost. And so those two words, adequate and affordable, need to go hand in hand, even though on the surface, they oppose each other. And the sustainable word is looking out for our children and grandchildren. So we have to find a way to provide benefits that are adequate, that a system still be affordable to those who are paying the contributions, and our children to come are going to be able to afford the system and get a reasonable benefit. On the right-hand side, we talk about what we're trying to avoid. There's certain things we're trying to avoid, and the number one is the fund being exhausted. Most of you have heard by now that if nothing is done, the fund will be exhausted. But the key thing is if nothing is done. The second thing we want to avoid, as I said a while ago, children and grandchildren paying a lot more to get a lot less than what's available today. And thirdly, we want to avoid many older people not having a pension in old age. And right now, there's only 1 in 8 self-employed people who contribute, which means that if that continues until they get old, most of people who are self-employed today won't have a reliable source of income in old age. And they'll depend on their children, the neighborhood, and then eventually the state, which is taxpayers, to help them make ends meet. So most of you may remember that, 18 years ago, some major reforms were done to the NIS. In short, the contribution rate was increased, the pension age was increased, but the benefits were reduced slightly. Since then, and the projections were made, hopefully NIS would have been sustainable for the medium term, but since then, we've had some unfortunate outcomes. The population is now declining. We actually have more deaths than we have births since 2017. So the number of babies being born is less than the number of people who are dying. The number of employed persons in the population has gradually come down over the last 15 years. The economy has been growth has been more negative than it has been positive. As we see here from these two charts on the left, GDP growth has been negative in 9 out of the last 13 years. The big negative is COVID, but we all know why. On the right-hand side, we see that the red line, which is the number of employed persons, is coming down from where it was back in 2007 and 2011. We see the yellow line, which is NIS contributors, which is now just over 100,000 from nearly 130,000 15 years ago. Right? So essentially, the economy is not growing fast. The number of employed persons is going down, and the number of NIS contributors is going down. And NIS depends on contributors and a working economy to make sure that it functions and is sustainable. 4 years ago, the government decided to restructure some of government's debt, and by so doing, it reduced its interest obligations every year, which hopefully would have translated to more money going into real investments into the economy and helping to boost economic circumstances to make ends meet. Yes, NIS lost $1 billion in assets, but from an economic standpoint, and I won't spend too much time on this right now, is that taxpayers who fund government's taxes are the same group who pay NIS contributions. So to the extent that NIS lost $1 billion, future taxpayers also are off the hook for $1 billion. So while NIS lost $1 billion, there's a net zero sum for all of Barbados. And the hope is that by allowing the economy to grow and be stronger, NIS could possibly be stronger. It's impossible to have a strong NIS in a weak Barbados. Just impossible. As we all know, COVID-19 hit us 2 years ago, and the main effect for the National Insurance Fund was lower employment. So contribution income was down, but benefit income was pretty much as expected. I mentioned a while ago self-employed persons, only 1 in 8 contribute, which is something we really have to work on. And then the last 2 buttons here talk about administrative challenges the NIS has in terms of service delivery. We've heard many complaints about service being slow, and also we are aware that audited annual reports and statements that are audited are now over 10 years late. And so that's some system challenges that NIS has to work through and hopefully can improve on in the short term. So the future looks as presented on the screen. From a population standpoint, what we forecast is that every single year going forward, the population will decrease. I mentioned a while ago, births are less than deaths. We still believe there's migration going out, net out. And so what we have projected is a reducing number of children, which is the blue, a reducing number of workers, which is the yellow, working age population, but an increasing number of pensioners. And NIS's benefit expenditure, 73% goes towards old age pensions. So you could imagine that if you have a growing population of pensioners for your most expensive benefit, then that's going to be a lot of pressure on the National Insurance Fund going forward. And that pressure leads to a projection now that if nothing is done, the fund will be depleted in 2034 to 2041. So we did a range, several scenarios, better economic times, worse economic times. So it could be 12 years from now, or 19 years from now, or somewhere around that period. And the biggest challenge is that even though the fund could be depleted, it doesn't mean there's no more NIS, because NIS can still collect contributions from the people who are working and the employers for whom they work. The challenge is the gap between what's coming in and what's going out. So on the right side, you see a chart with 2 lines. The red line is a contribution rate, now average 18%. If that remains unchanged, then the costs are going to keep increasing. That's the green line, about 24% today to about 30% in the mid-2030s. So the gap today is about 6% of wages. So we're collecting 18, but paying out 24. That gap in 15 years' time is going to be around 12% to 13% of contributions, which is significant. And that significant size of the gap is probably better depicted here on this colorful chart, where the blue at the bottom is contribution income, about just over $600 million today per annum. The top line, which is the dark line on top, is expenditure. So while we're collecting $800 million, the expenditure is about $800 million, a gap of about $200 million per year. And this has increased over the last few years, not just because of COVID. In the last few years, and as shown on the graph, the yellow section is investment income, which is the money that is a return on the nearly $4 billion that's invested in various securities. All of that is going towards paying pensions today. And the green, which is the selling of assets, so because the blue plus the yellow weren't enough to meet total expenditure, assets had to be liquidated early to help pay benefits. And that's the green. Now, if you think about your own home finances, if you have savings and you start calling on those savings and dipping into those wherever you have them, and you keep doing that year after year after year, there'll eventually be nothing left. And the projection here is that in the mid-2030s, if there's nothing left, the orange or the red is a gap that needs to be filled. And that's about $700 million at the very beginning. So from $200 million today to $700 million 13, 14 years from now, that's a huge gap to fill. And so the goal of the reforms would be to increase the blue and reduce that top expenditure line. I think you can all agree with me, based on what you've just seen, that the National Insurance Fund in its current state is not sustainable. At the current contribution rate, average 18%, and the benefits that are now offered under that fund. And the question is, what could really cause this fund to be depleted so quickly? Right? It's $4 billion, just about 3.9. You know, that's only 12, 15 years away. What could really cause that? And the first point is demographics, over which most of us have no control over. But as we see here, back when pension reform was done 18 years ago, there were 3.6 contributors for every one pensioner. That's 3.6 people putting in for every one taken out. That number today is about 2.4, maybe even 2.3 as we speak in 2022. And we project further declines to 1.8 in 2040 and 1.7. And this is consistent with family sizes. As we know, long-time people had 5, 6 children, then it became 3 and 4 children. Now it's 1, 2, and in many cases, no children. And if you think about trying to support mommy and daddy who have no pension income, it's much more easy when you have 6 children or 5 siblings, probably better, than when you have no siblings and it's only you to take care of your parents, right? And the same thing for government with taxes and the same thing for NIS with contributions. We also have no guidelines. So even though the actuary came in every 3 years and did projections, gave a report, made some recommendations, there was no need, there was no requirement for the government of the day to act or do things differently. And so hopefully when we're done the dialogue in the next few months, next few weeks, we can have some guidelines that the next actuary coming in will have, and then the government will have to act if the benchmarks that we set are not met. And the third, and perhaps just as important cause for the fund to possibly be depleted in 15 years' time is kicking the can down the road, right? If we do nothing and just wait until D-Day comes, D-Day will come and catch us. And so what we have in this case is the government deciding not to kick the can down the road and to start dialogue early. We believe there are 4 ingredients that are going to allow the National Insurance Fund to be sustainable for the long term, ensuring that children and grandchildren can get their pension when it's their turn to get. The first one is the economy. Right? As I said earlier, we cannot have a strong NIS in a weak Barbados economy. The two just don't go hand in hand because NIS depends on contributors, earning wages, employers who are able to afford the contributions to pay into the NIS. So what we really want is, if it's a big economy, whether from migration, whether from having more babies, whether it be people working harder, working smarter, Barbadians coming back home and investing, attracting foreign investment and growing the country, that would be the first ingredient we believe for success. The second one is design. NIS was celebrating 55 years 2 months ago in early June, and the NIS today looks very much like it did 55 years ago. And so, however, life has changed. The gig economy is taking over. A lot of people are now working from home on their laptops and their pajamas. And so we have to find a way to catch vendors and plumbers and carpenters, lawyers, doctors, whoever they are, working on an informal basis to pay contributions and contribute to the well-being of the fund and the state in general. And by all programs, we mean even the welfare ones from government and the ones from NIS, so that all the programs we have that support incomes are going to be working like a puzzle. They fit together, no overlaps and no gaps. But having said all of that, we need to find a balance between the adequacy of benefits, the affordability of contributions, and long-term sustainability. In 2022, we know that systems are able to do a lot more now than they were 10, 15 years ago. And so NIS and the government need to find a way to improve their systems so that they be effective and efficient. They all speak to one another, and NIS knows what's happening on licensing on NIS. And so we can find a way to ensure that there's better compliance and better service delivery at all points along the way. And finally, some people say good governance. I like to say honest and responsible government. And this is not only the Prime Minister, not only Cabinet, but all levels of leadership in the country, and in this case, NIS. Right? Leadership is tough. Right? And every now and again, things come at you and you have to decide what to do. And so being honest and responsible means being proactive. It means studying the options and taking those tough decisions in advance of crisis coming along. As the Prime Minister said last week, we are not in crisis. We don't want to get there. And so I think the government has shown that in this case they've been honest and responsible. They wish sharing the full story with the population in a responsible way. And through consultation, the hope is that we can find a Barbados solution to this Barbados problem. So what are the options that we have to look at? And in your own home finances, if you have a shortfall or believe you have a shortfall down the road, there's really only two things that you can do. You either have to get more money coming in or cut your spending. And the same goes for NIS. Increasing the contribution can come from a variety of ways. More contributors, so more workers, better compliance, more contributions coming in. We can raise the contribution rate, which is now 18.25% in the private sector. Higher investment earnings, so there's money invested still, most of it in government debt. Hopefully we can try and find a way to get higher investment earnings. And if push comes to shove, and there's a need for additional funds to meet that gap I showed earlier, government has to inject some money into the fund. But again, money coming from government comes from you as taxpayers. So whether you call it NIS in the right pocket, there you go, or taxes in the left pocket, it's still coming from you. On the expenditure side, we can look at finding a way to reduce the average new pension, right? So if you think about, we won't be supporting, like reducing life expectancy, killing everybody who's 85 and over. We won't be talking about that. What we can do is look at the new pension amount that people get and reducing that slightly so that going forward, we can reduce long-term cost. And there's several ways that we can do that. We can do a different structure. As I said, 55 years old, the structure may not work as well as it did 55 years ago. Look at the new structure. We could look at a different pillar. So for example, there are options around the world where there's a flat pension payable to everybody who is old. And that's designed to eliminate poverty to a certain extent. And above that, you can have an NIS that provides a smaller benefit that's based on the contributions you've made and the incomes that you have. We can target benefits to higher income, to lower income people versus higher income people. We can do a more defined contribution approach where you get back, and what you get back is linked to exactly what you put in. Right? So we have options. But at the end of the day, the average new pension needs to be smaller if we want to sustain the pension. The second option is to start pensions later. 60 is the first age for a reduced pension. 67 is the age for a full pension. We possibly could start either 60, and move to 62, 65, or maybe move 67 to 68, 69, 70, right? All these are options, right? And as the chairman said, nothing is off the table and everything's up for discussion as we go forward, and we look forward to hearing from you in the next few minutes. The last point is smaller cost of living adjustments. As you all know, those of you who get pensions, every January or most Januaries, there's an adjustment to your pension. It's small, but inflation has been relatively low in the last few years, before this year. And the law says that every January it should be increased. It was not done during COVID and 21 or 22. We're waiting for the wage index to be produced. That's one of the inputs into the formula. But that could be looked at as a way of reducing long-term costs and having pensioners bear a little bit of the burden of keeping the system afloat. And just to be more specific, as I mentioned some of them already, in terms of the options for reform, we can look at making the increase in the first age from 60 to something else, the pensionable age where there's no more reduction from 67 to something a little bit higher, change the formula. Right now, it's quite generous right now, because after 20 years of contributions, it's 40% of your final 5-year average wages. The 20% that's available after that is earned after 16 years. So it's very, very generous to short service for those with 20 years of contributions. And that could be abused, right? It's also not good for people who, as migrants, come into Barbados, who after 25 years of contribution or 20 years of contributions, they get a pretty good benefit. And so we have to look at that and see whether after 55 years, there's still a need for such generosity in the early years of contributions. So that would mean taking longer to get to 60%. We could also reduce the 60% to 55% or 50% maximum. So for the young person starting out now, they would know that their maximum replacement rate is maybe 50%, and they then now need to find other sources of income, whether it be through the employer pension plan or through their own savings, to top up to what they think they need to live comfortably in old age. The one thing we are going to look at very closely as well is a career-based earnings pension. So in the US, Canada, and most of the OECD countries, their pensions are based on what we call career earnings. So it looks at earnings from day one when you started working to day last when you stop working. And then we index them and average them over the career. So it gives you really a true flavor of what you've contributed and what you've earned. Right now, it's heavily weighted to short service, as I said, and final wages at the end. And the final point is the multi-pillar system, which I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to wrap up now, but at the end of the day, and through consultation for the next few weeks, the idea is to look at everything that's on the table, right? Develop set of priorities and beliefs that we really want to save our NIS. We believe that, we should not overly burden generations to come. Whether we believe that the fund should be invested locally, overseas, whether we believe that the NIS needs to be just one component of a multi-pillar approach. And we're going to ask you, the population, to decide on what's important to you as Barbadians, what's important to you to ensure that the fund is sustained. And hopefully, when we come up with the Barbados solution, it'll be acceptable to most. And so thank you for your attention, and I'll pass over to Rodden Adams.
Thanks. Thank you, Derek. Just before we open the floor to questions, there are a few things in Derek's presentation I want to highlight. So the first one is this, is that as things stand today, the fund is very strong. It's almost $4 billion worth of assets sitting in there. And that is equal to the equivalent of 5 years current spending on benefits expenditure. That is to say, if everything stayed as it was, that fund could pay another 5 years worth of benefits. But things are not going to stay as they are. And this is a very important point I want to highlight from Mr. Osborne's presentation. And I'm going to put 3 questions to you that will explain this. So the first one concerns life expectancy. Does anyone know how long a child who's born today, a Barbadian child born today, can expect to live? What his life expectancy is born today? Okay, there's a small margin of error between men and women, a couple of years. What was that? Well, you're spoiling my presentation, but it's about 80. Now, do you know the same life expectancy number when this scheme was conceived, for lack of a better word, birthed in 1967? A child born in 1967, what age could they have expected to live to? That's very close. I heard 65. It's a little under 68, about 67 and a half. What does this mean? This means that over time, as people live longer, they're drawing their benefits for a lot longer than the architects of this scheme thought they would draw the benefits for. And those benefits are indexed. So they're not going to go down. They're fixed. It's inexorable. As retirees expand, which is what is happening, the cost of those benefits expands. So here's the second question. Does anybody know what the average number of children a woman today, in childbearing age, say 25, actually has? How many children do women today tend to have? A little more than 1.5. It's about 1.7. Now, nobody has 0.7 of a child, but it's the average, so it's under 2. Now, do you know in 1967, again, when this scheme was designed, what the designers were looking at in terms of the average number of children that women had? Anybody? I couldn't hear a distinct answer, but it's a little under 4. And if you go back in the 1950s, the number was 6. So over time, the population is shrinking. Over time, we've gone from 6 in the 50s to 4 or a little under 4 in the 60s to under 2 today. So again, what does that mean? That means that there are fewer people entering our workforce. There are fewer people contributing, because it is contributors who pay and finance the benefits of retirees. So on the one hand, we have this growing retiree population, and we should rejoice that the life expectancy age has gone up, but there's a price to progress. And on the other hand, we have a shrinking workforce. And I think 2017, Derek can confirm, was the first year that we think the population actually declined, and natural decline happened in Barbados. So there's a shrinking pool of money to finance these retirees. But this is not the most important point. The most important point concerns the economy. Now, Derek has a slide in there there was a bar chart that showed the average growth of the economy every year since about 2006, I think it was. Now, even if we drop that outlier in 2020, if you look at that chart, have a guess at the average economic growth every year for the last 13 or 14 years. You think it's 2%, 3%? It's less than 1%. On average, every year, our economy, since the period portrayed in that chart, has gone up about 0.7%. Now, in the 1960s, the average growth every single year from 1960 to 70 is about 6%. So look at this scheme. 1960s, very strong economic growth, high fertility rates, and which meant a growing and expanding workforce, and a relatively low life expectancy compared to today. That scheme was not designed for the times we live in now. It's a structural problem that we're facing today. And by structural, somebody asked me, what do you mean structural? It's like any parent at the start of every school year has to buy shoes for their child, and they know every year the child has outgrown the shoes. Our benefits have outgrown our capacity to pay them. So when I say it's a structural problem, this is what I mean. And I want to put a number on it because I know many people in the press and in social media are focusing on operational issues, and these are serious things that we have to look at. But this structural problem, this report forecasts a deficit in 2040 of about $908 million. Right. Now, if we look at some of the key things we could do on the operational side, Derek mentioned the investment portfolio. I think that's been averaging historically about 6%, in recent times 4.5%, 4.8%, which is respectable, I have to tell you, although people are saying in parts of the press that we can sweat a lot more money out of it. Let's say that we could double that, which is a very tall order, but let's say we could double that. That would be worth about $180 million, okay? So bear that in mind. And the second point, there's been a lot of talk, and we have to do it, about improving compliance, or as we were told to say by a medical professional, adherence. You know, apparently that encourages people to take their medicine rather than asking them to comply. But let's pretend for a moment we could regularize the entire informal sector. We know what that represents. The IDB had a study of about 2016 that estimated that to be about 1.5 billion US dollars. So we can infer from what we know about contribution rates that represents about 34,000 people, and that would be worth about $220 million. So those are the two big things that we can easily identify where we can improve. But together, they don't equal half of the deficit that's coming from this structural problem. So this is the huge challenge that we have. So although it may be daunting looking at it that way, I would say that we have to bear in mind many other countries have faced this issue. There are a lot of precedents. There are a lot of examples of what has been done and what can be done, what we can learn from. So I would say don't be disheartened. We can collectively, we can fix this. It's been done in other places, and we can do it also. But it is important to look at the overall structural issue we've got when we're coming up with ideas and when we're making our comments. So I want to stop there for the moment and invite the floor, open the floor, and invite some questions now. Would you mind repeating someone might have to adjust that mic for you. Just repeating your name before you get into the questions.
Hi, good evening. I'm Sandra Squires. Right. Okay, I'm not sure if I might have missed this information in the presentation, but I was wondering what is the percentage difference between the persons that are eligible to pay the contribution and those that are not paying it. Because my concern is that I don't think that we are aggressive enough going after persons who should be paying. So I think that's one area that we can look at or give more attention to. You want to respond to that?
One, I guess you're referring to both employers and self-employed persons.
Yes, please.
So I can't give you the exact percentage of employed persons. There are two issues with employed persons. One is that there's some employers who just don't pay, don't deduct and don't pay. And there's some employers who do deduct and don't pay, right? And then some pay late. So we don't have the numbers. I think there's an estimate that was on that Kim gave the other day for outstanding contributions. That's something we really have to look at and get a good number as to what percent of employers are up to date, and those not up to date, how large is that deficit?
And the second area of concern, you say that about 73% are no benefit from the old age pension. Do you still, the 73% are,
Of all benefits,
yes.
73% is old age.
Old age, right, good.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, I got two different sources of information, but there was one person who informed me that you'd still do non-contributory pension, but it's not automatic, right? I'm wondering if you could look maybe at up in that age. So in other words, rather than at 67, the non-contributors get a pension once they qualify. Why not take that number to maybe 70, 72, and leave the contributors at the lower rate?
Right. I'll go first. So the non-con pension is mainly a state finance pension. NIS stopped financing new benefits in 1998, and anything that was increased above $74 something cents back then is paid for the government. So there are few people left on the NIS roll. It's only about $7 million a year for NIS this year.
Oh, okay.
And $643 million for old age pensions. It's really, really small and going down. So the old age non-contributory pension is really a government pension, which is designed to ensure that people who do not have a contributory NIS have something on which to live on.
Okay. All right. I just was wondering if that would make a difference, because every little counts.
Every little counts, and I'll say it now. So NIS has other benefits as well. There's sickness, there's maternity, there's invalidity, there's survivors, and all of them look as they looked 55 years ago, right? And so we need to review each of them, determine what a true objective for each benefit is today in today's society, and determine whether we need to change. Now, a change could mean plus. For example, paternity benefit has been talked about for several years now. We have employers who are now paying a benefit to husbands and male spouses whose wife or girlfriend had a baby, right? But NIS does not have a benefit for that. And so the thinking is within the Ministry of Labor that if we have a paternity leave in the law, that employers must or should allow men to take leave, and NIS in turn has a benefit, right? So we have to look at maybe adding or improving some benefits, but at the same time having some reducing costs. We'd have a net zero effect at least.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Good evening. My name is Charlie Edwards. I just want to say I'm not in agreement with what the first speaker said about increasing non-contributory pension. My mom was a lady, she never had to work, but she went about the welfare and those places to try to get help. She was a very innocent person, and things was very hard with her financially. And when the age came that she was able to get pension, I used to be very proud to see she having her own money, and that provided a lot of independence for her, and it made me very happy. So, a no to that statement, please.
Right. So thank you for that. And just to go back to the first point, I think, and she made a good point about the age, right? We have to look and see whether or not 67 is the right age for non-contributory pension. As Mr. Adams said earlier, we're now living a lot longer than we were 50 years ago, 20 years ago, right? And so it could be maybe 68 for the non-con pension. And that, while that won't save NIS any money, it'll save government some money, so they can do more with what they have to improve other circumstances. don't think the people on here can hear you, so come a little closer, please.
I sat and I listened to everything that everyone had to say. You made a comment stating that there are structural issues and deficits. For a couple of years now, you've been hearing that governments, regardless of if it's B, D, or NDP, if they have an issue, they draw from the National Insurance Scheme. Now you're saying in a couple of years, the scheme will be depleted. Is there any way for us, Bajans, who have contributed to the scheme, to recover those funds? Because that is part and parcel of the problem. We cannot be putting money into a fund and every time the government has an issue, they dip into the fund. Because at the end of the day, when you dip into the fund, you're dipping from money from the citizens. We didn't tell you that you could dip. No one asked us if you could dip. But now you're here and you're asking us for solutions to a problem that you guys created. We didn't create this problem. We are law-abiding citizens who sat, contributed faithfully to a scheme, thinking that when we get 65, you move the table to 67, that we're assured a pension. It's not fair on no kind of level. And I sit and I listen to every single person speak about everything. And the first thing that you guys need to do is stop governments from dipping into our money.
You want to go? So, thank you for your comment. And all I'll say is that there are rules that govern the National Insurance Fund and investments. Any money that government borrowed or that was lent to government was done, as far as I have seen, in the proper way. There was debt restructuring, which accounted for all government debt. And I think that so we have to find a way, as she said, to ensure that governance. I mentioned good governance earlier, right? And I think it really relates to good governance and strong boards. So if there is a phone call from a minister or pressure from the government to lend some more money beyond what your limits say is acceptable, you say no, right? And I think, so we have to find a way to have boards and leaders that are going to be responsible and ensure that the funds are borrowed and invested wisely. And, again, we have to remember, any money that government spent was spent on the people of Barbados. You may not agree on how it was spent. Sorry, but no? Well, I'll leave that one alone, and maybe Mr. Adams, but I really believe that when government collects and spends, right, it spends money in the budget, whatever budget it has.
Just before the next question, I just say, when it comes to governance, that this board feels very strongly that it's going to do everything in its powers to make sure that the rules around what's called the fund itself are respected. We know that rules have been changed in the past. I think 2013, the rule was changed to up the allocation in terms of money lent to the government. I think these things and the process by which it's done certainly need to be reviewed. However that fund is managed, it has to be in the interest of the NIS first. I'll stop there.
Well, I just wanted to add my little 2 cents to that. As I said earlier, the National Insurance Scheme is a social security scheme. It assists with the development of the country in the sense that where people pay national insurance, those resources are pooled. Once you have those pooled resources, the country can develop its infrastructure and can do projects for the benefit of the people. Yes, that is one side of it. On the other side of it is how far do you proceed with your investments in government paper? I think, and Derek can correct me again, he knows the figures on the top of his head. For the last 2 actuarial reports, or possibly more, Derek, you can tell us, you have always recommended to us that our investment in government paper should be reduced.
Correct.
presently, I don't know the figures. I think it's something like 60-something%. You go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, so the chairman is talking about, so NIS does have an investment policy, and they've always had one for donkey years. And the policy includes what we call an asset allocation target, right? So it has equities, say, between, 5 and 10%. Well, each asset class has a range which is acceptable. Government bonds, I believe, was 50% for the most of the period in the last 15, 20 years. 60 or 50, I think it's 50, 60. It doesn't matter. The point, though, is that for the last 10 or 15 years, they've exceeded the maximum limit in the investment policy, right? Which means that even though the policy existed, boards still allowed further investments to be made in government of Barbados, okay? And that is where I think the weakness lies. As I mentioned earlier, and I really believe this, and I believe in good governance. If a minister calls, and the Minister of Finance ultimately has authority to drive investments, that probably can be looked at to change. But if a board is resolute that we're not investing any more in government, a phone call can't change that unless it becomes a directive from the minister in writing, and then on the hook is the minister, not the board, right? And so hopefully board members in the future, whether they be from labor, from employers, or from the government, can be strong enough to say, we agree with the policy we have in writing, we're not going to change from this policy, and then so we're going to say no if any investment, whether it be public or private, does not meet the terms of the investment policy.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to say, shall we move on to the, you want one more point?
I just wanted to say two things. One, that with respect, the present situation with the board since 2018 is that far from there being any investment in government bonds or paper, it's the other way around. Because of the restructuring, etc., you know the story. But secondly, getting back to the board, the board is, as far as I am concerned, a very strong board. It is institutionally or structurally sound and strong. In accordance with the Act, we have on the board a representative, a board member, nominated by the National Union of Public Workers. And normally the General Secretary, Richard Green, attends. If he can't attend those meetings, his deputy attends. We also have on the board, so you have the National Union of Public Workers represented on the board. And Richard will tell you at board meetings, Richard will say, I have my interests to represent. The other person on the board, the other union members, if I may say so, is a representative from the Barbados Workers Union. And the same thing applies. So between the NUPW and the Barbados Workers Union, the interests of the employees in this country are vigorously represented. 3, you have another member of the board is a representative from the Barbados Employers Confederation. So employers are represented, as well as a representative from the Barbados Hotel Tourism Association, which we consider to be our largest employer. So that when you look at the board, and then you look at that, and you look up, the government then appoints 3 board members, or the minister, and those board members are to be appointed you look at the qualifications and what they can do. The recent appointment, first of all, there was Mr. Avinash Prasad dealing with investments. He was replaced by my friend Rawdon, who, as you can see, is knowledgeable and knows, as far as I'm concerned, knows exactly what he's doing. In terms of investments, Recently on the board, again, we have Mr. Michael Edgell, who is an accountant, retired from KPMG. And not only that, he's familiar with the accounts of the NIS because he was at KPMG, he had dealings with the NIS. So I say that to say that yes, the board is a strong board, and this board there are a number of issues that it has, but at the end of the day, I am satisfied that we have a strong board, and it is.
Thank you, Leslie. And just to underline a couple of things, we know about the investment rules and how they need to be enforced. This is more about those rules than anybody coming in and taking money. Nobody came and took money. This is really about following the governance policy. But I want to underline again that really we're here about all of these matters, but above all, this difference between the structure of this scheme in the 1960s and the structure of it today in the 2020s, that structural problem that I mentioned. So I invite, I'm sorry you've had to sit back down, but please come and have your question, but let us remember the overall reason we're here.
Good evening. My name is Jane Goddard. I have been working for 46 years and contributing continuously. I have benefited from maternity leave. I have benefited from sick leave. For most of the 46 years, I have been in accounting. One of my responsibilities for most of the 46 years has been payroll. At one time, would have been probably the late 70s, the government used to change percentages and do retroactive payments and all sorts of things with tax and with national insurance. And I was one of the programmers at Plantations Trading Company Limited who was responsible for programming those during the night so that they would be ready to work the next day. Now, I believe that the first thing that has to happen, no matter how strong the board is that the 10 years without audited financial statements is unacceptable. We need to know what the position is. I heard the Auditor General say that not only is PAYE, no, isn't right, that national insurance is paying dead people. That I have a problem with. I believe that if there is an audit and things are put in perspective, we will be able to move forward from a better position. Now, I am old, not that old though, and in my younger days, an officer from the National Insurance Scheme used to come around. She didn't come around every week or every month, but her visit was a pleasure. She came to check to see that all the calculations were correct and that we were doing what our duty was. That stopped many years ago. And I think that what we have to do now is to try to encourage people without threatening them to file and pay national insurance, whether they are self-employed or employees. I am happy that I have performed my duty and my responsibility for 46 years. And please God, when I reach 67, there will be money inside there for me to get my pension because I've worked my tail off for 46 years. Thanks.
I beg your pardon, ma'am. We just were deciding who would answer the previous comments, you know.
Okay, good night. My name is Cassandra Bowen. I have a number of things to say. I don't normally get involved in any of these matters. I really don't like being my business. But after listening to the press conference, I felt strongly about what I heard. And like one of the other members who spoke earlier, I remember when my grandmother got her pension taken away because she brought her 3 grandchildren to Barbados from an orphanage in Trinidad, and NIS told her that if she could afford to support 3 children, additionally to what she had, then she did not need the money. So my grandmother went through all of the rest of her years until she died without pension. That was wrong. When I heard the press conference, the first thing that hit me is another fear tactic. 12 years of money left. It seems like if every time we have a press conference, it brings fear on the country again. What's gonna happen next? And as a person who has just retired and seeing what I got as a gratuity, because if I had a mortgage, a car to pay for, children to send to school, or God forbid, if I got ill, that money would be of no use to me. What I currently get as a pension, by the time that I done pay all the necessary bills, I am back to square one. Pension is like working from payday to payday. And I know a lot of people feel like this. I have a concern with the fact that money was borrowed from the NIS and not paid back. And I feel that somebody should be held responsible for that. With KIPO, if as a small business person, you have to submit your financials every year. And if we have a national insurance department and all of these top people inside there, and we cannot get audited reports on a regular basis, then somebody should get fired. That's how I feel. At this point, I feel that legislation should be put in place that no more money should be borrowed from NIS for the next 12 to 15 years, unless it is for investment purposes. I also feel that it should be made mandatory that reports have to be filed on time or reprimand those in charge for filing and do due diligence. A law should be enforced on employers, local, private, overseas entities, even churches who have taken out the necessary funds and not paid into the system, and a requisite penalty applied for non-compliance. It is done with land tax, and it is done with VAT, and I feel it should be done here and police. Nothing should be allowed to go through the cracks. Employees who decide they want their pay, employees who decide they don't want to pay in the NIS should be reprimanded. Likewise, employees who decide they want to pay their NIS themselves should be locked into a system to ensure that they can do so. We have the technology. The Prime Minister assured us we have the technology, and I know it can be done. When I went into the system at 18 years old, I did not look down the road and think about retirement. And I believe that during my working years, we should have had some information workshops, seminars, something that would give you an understanding of what will happen down the road. That was never done. At this point, I believe that we can work with insurance companies to see who is willing to provide a good pension plan for workers and ask them to pay into the system along with their national insurance so that they can get the leverage going down the road. We need to educate. You see, we can't sit down here and say 55 years down the line, we now check in for this. It's a waste of time, okay? We need to educate from the primary schools all the way to the tertiary level about the scheme, the benefits, and what we as a people need to do to keep it sustainable. We cannot have people coming out to UE as textbook artists, not knowing nothing more. And I am saying that with every passion I got in my heart, because I work with some of them, textbook artists, and not knowing that these are things that they need to do. Also, when I worked in government and I wanted to have a side business, it was like pulling teeth. You had to follow the rules. You had to write and ask for permission. Had I been allowed that second job while I was there, I would be able to sit down quiet tonight and say I have my nest egg. This is something we need to go back and look at. We need to find an incentive, not money of some kind, to get small entrepreneurs to pay into the system. Again, more education is needed here. Again, in the form of workshops and seminars and face-to-face conversations. We ask everybody now to become an entrepreneur. The bank is giving you real stress. Nobody has looked at that. We got thousands of office space downtown that lock up, and nobody would say, bring the prices down so the entrepreneurs could go in there so we could pay the system. You see, you can't look at this thing in a vacuum. You gotta bring all the sectors in, provide the necessary things going forward so people feel comfortable to be able to go out there and say, look, I believe in this system, they are giving me X, I'm going to do Y. And this is my last little bit. There must be transparency at every corner, whether it be NIS or anybody else in this country. If we do not get it right now, we will suffer even more down the road. And a lot of people in this country suffering. Might not be all up there, might not be some of us in here, but a lot of people in this country suffering. Gone are the days when your next door neighbor would give you a breadfruit. Now you gotta pay for it. That's how serious it gets in this country. Many of my friends from overseas ask me, how will you afford to live in Barbados? And I usually smile and say, I do with what I have, and I'm grateful. We will not keep the cream of the crop around this country. They will seek greener pastures. Honestly, if I had the opportunity, I would go someplace else and live. I don't want to live here anymore. I really don't. I want the same problem somewhere else with different people. The other problem that I have is that every time you see a board announced, the same faces is like Coke and Pepsi. The same people, the same faces. What about me? Why can't I be on the board? I might not be an actuary, I might not be an accountant, I might not be none of those things, but I got a brain and I understand, and I probably understand better than the people who on the board. What about all these other people in here? We don't get the opportunity to be on the board. And yes, sir, I understand. BWU, tourism, and all of these people wrap up in the same bag. They're going to speak the same language. We have to be accountable for all of us, from the government back down to the man in the street. This is paramount. We have a lot of people who I saw on Kadooment Day walking around selling water. You think that person is going to pay NIS? It's a seasonal thing. How are we going? And that person might go out there and get hit by a truck. Somebody has to pay for that. Every time somebody gets shot in this country, they run to the QEH and they get patched up. At great expense. But I might be waiting for a surgery and I hear COVID. I hope people listening. I just had a friend who went in there, dialysis, and there was not a machine. When a machine was provided, nobody knew how to use it. That person died. This is real, people. This is real. And I honestly, I feel real passionate about it. It is very real. We have, it's not only looking at this scheme, it has to be a holistic thing that we are doing. The world has changed, and more changes are coming, and we have to be ready. If COVID has taught us nothing, let us learn from it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. I think we'll have the CEO make a few observations.
Yeah. Good evening again. Thank you very much for those recommendations. Thank you very much for taking the time to document those. If you are minded, we will be happy to get what you have written, because I thought there was a lot of useful information there, including the fact that it's a holistic thing that we're dealing with, and you have to look at it in broadly. So I'm just going to speak to a couple of the things that were raised by both of you. Certainly, compliance is an issue, and I was pleased to hear that at one time when you saw the inspectors, it was a pleasure. Over time, that has changed, but if we could get back there, and that is our intention, that the inspectors help with registration and guidance and information and so forth. So I'd be happy to talk to you later to get some details on what the inspectors did, because I'm so happy to hear that the inspector is a pleasure. I have some inspectors up there, and they're happy to hear that as well. So a couple of things. Dead people, I know that is a big issue. At present, we pay each month 48,000 pensioners. So this is pensioners only. This is not disability or anything. 48,000 pensioners. Years ago, the life certificate was discontinued. So therefore, we wait for the monthly update from the registry. So right now, we are processing payments for the end of August into September. So we are always ahead. So we are always going to be mailing out pensions ahead. So we depend on two systems. One, updating our records based on the registry and the goodwill of families to notify us that the person have died. So, so I would say that 5 out of 48,000, and the system was able to still identify the 5 out of 48,000, does show that we do have a system in place. And when I mail out at the end of August checks, somebody's going to have a check that takes them to the end of September, but may, God forbid, die in that period. That is what we are looking at, okay? So we have looked at how often we should get the updates from the registry, how often we should update our system, and we are certainly addressing it. When we did some investigations, these things happened in 2020, and when we went to the home of a deceased person, they had the check stacked there. So they just figured that after a while we would stop sending them, but they didn't think to return them or to notify us that had happened. So, but rest assured that that is something that we are working on. The other area is the audit. The NIS manages 6 funds, and the funds are all separate. The NIS fund, the severance fund, unemployment, catastrophe, retraining, and the sugar workers providence fund. And I want to pause here and say that the sugar workers providence fund still have a number of persons, 5 persons who still receive benefits, and so that is slowly coming to an end. And that shows you that from time to time, you always have to adjust. The sugar workers providence fund was needed 55 years ago, but it's not needed now. So you always have to be looking at what's the social security measures that you need to put in place. So I go back to the funds and to say that they're managed separately. The Act governs how they should be managed. There's no real commingling of the funds. Each fund has its own income statement and its own balance sheet. We take our responsibilities for managing those funds very seriously, and on my desk would be the July 31st, 2020, July 31st, 2022 financial statements. It is my understanding, because most of you know that I am new there, but in going back through and we're looking at where we are, in 2010, the financial requirements were changed so that you move from a cash accounting to an accrual accounting. Now, many of you know that when a company is doing its audits, it will send a letter to the creditors and the debtors, do you owe this? Now, when we send out those kinds of letters, nobody is going to reply, yes, I owe NIS this. So therefore, we have to justify and show the auditors how we can validate the accounts receivable. If not, we go back to cash. So it is only one section of our financial statements that are there that the auditor, and so the Auditor General is working with us to develop and to implement, I would say, a framework that will satisfy internationally accepted accounting standards and also provide what we call, and all of you that are accountants will know, supporting schedules that can be validated. So the financial statements are prepared. They are prepared. And for the smaller funds, catastrophe and so forth, they have been audited up to 2015, 2016. So don't feel that we don't do financial statements each month and which go to the board. They are done, they are prepared. It is just working with the auditor to get a framework that is acceptable, that can see those financial statements certified, and then once they're certified, then they're laid in Parliament and they'll be public documents. So we would apologize that you haven't had sight of them because they aren't public documents, but rest assured they are there. Rodden, I think that. I think I answered most of the questions that you asked.
I think that's.
If you need any further, I am happy to share.
I would just add on one thing there about the timing. We are very hopeful the accounts from 2012 to 2017. We're aiming to settle those by the end of this year, and the rest by June next year.
I am Norma Springer, and endorse everything that has been said before. I want to posit that fixing the NIS is just fixing the roof of the house. We have to look at the walls and the foundation. And the walls and the foundation is actually the labor structure systems, how the labor systems are organized and managed in Barbados. And we spoke about good design and capturing all the workers. And when I say all, definitely all. And you're working on that. I give that. I have some cousins in the United States who work as barbers and carpenters and masons, and they have to be registered. They have to be licensed every year. And that license issue is related to their income tax payments and all other taxes and rates that they have to pay. That is not rocket science. The other thing that concerns me is that in this day and age, Barbados still has all these little funny little databases, a database at the registry, a database at NIS, a database left, right, and center. Where is the central database that manages all the data and every institution have access to it according to its needs? Why do you have to wait to get a report from the registry? The coroner comes, he certifies, he puts it into his iPad, it goes to the registry, and it should come into your office same time. It should be flagged, even if it's just an orange flag, that you're alerted, this person has died, the coroner and the registry are going through their processes, and that alerts you to do certain things. So we're talking smart and all sorts of fancy technology and engineering systems, and we still have all these little minutiae around the place, which I can assure you much more expensive than having one central database that manages all the data for Barbados and becomes even an income sector if we manage it for the rest of the region. Labor. We've been having workforce adjustments over the years. And NIS, or the systems, have not been adjusting. There's been automation of labor, which means that fewer people in the middle and lower tiered sectors are required. Those are people falling out of the workforce, which means that contributions from them become less. We spend millions of dollars in education every year, and the return on that investment, to my mind, is dwindling. What you invest in education today is supposed to put into the NIS tomorrow, because you are expecting higher tiered people above gardeners, room attendants, security guards. And I am afraid that Barbadians are falling out of the higher tiered income brackets which pay into the NIS. I say this because I have here advertisements from the Nation newspaper. Here is one dated the 29th of July, 2022. Sorry, 29th of June. Nation newspaper, page 34. Vacancies. Nichols Bakery, a depot supervisor, a baker, and a pastry maker. This is what Nichols Bakery has approached the Immigration Department for. 2022. What has happened to all the bakers we've had? What's happened to the hospitality institution? What has happened to the BIMAP, who's teaching and training supervisors over the years? We need to import a supervisor to sell bread. And we all know how the work permit system works. We all know how foreign people in the workplace are paid, what goes on the books, what goes offshore. We know how it works. So Barbados has to really have a proper integration system of what skill sets are available on this island that the Immigration Department has access to know that when you make an application like this, it has no valid basis for going forward. So when we talk about the structural things in the NIS, we need to look at the structural things in the labor market, in the labor management systems, and then put the roof on, which is the NIS. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Carolyn Edgel, and I'm happy to hear that Mr. Osborne was around for 20 years. In your introduction, you talked about the amendments that were made to NIS. We had increases 3 to 4 years. We changed the retirement age from 65 to 67. What we have not heard is the impact that that had on the fund. 10 years ago, we heard that the NIS fund will go belly up in the 2030s, in 2040s. We made adjustments to the contributions, but you had your slide earlier with the possible solutions. And on that slide, you still talked about increasing contributions. You still talked about increasing the retirement age. What was the impact of changing those contribution rates and increasing the retirement age on the expiry date, if you want to call it, on the fund? Because if we are going to say that the impact was 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, we are going to be here 10 years later to wash this all over again. Was that a viable solution? Is it going to work again? Is the structure of NIS even designed to last a lifetime? Are we putting plasters on sores? Are we fixing symptoms and not the real problem? Because, like, I would have expected to see slides, and perhaps that's because how I envision things, on the solutions and the impact that that will have on the fund. Would it extend the life of the fund 5 years? And I know you're an actuary. You already did your triangulations and all of that. So I don't think that it's an out of the way question. But if we are going to say that we increase contributions 3 years, I think it was 3 or 4 years back to back, we extended pension age, and the impact on the fund was just to increase its life by 2 years, I don't see how that is a viable solution to be up on a slide today.
Okay, thank you very much for that. You said some really, really good things there, and I'll try and be as simple as I can. So, excuse me? Okay, so in 2004, reforms were done, and hopefully, well, I'll say first, hopefully everybody has been able to download from the website, either the parliamentary website or the NIS website, the report, the full report. You only see a snapshot on these slides here tonight, but the report is about 80 pages long, and it includes some charts that show the history of the fund, and you can clearly see after pension reform, the size of the reserves began to grow, right? So it was a clear indication that it began to grow. Not in the report is a graph that I have seen internally, which is a graph of the average pension, right? Which is designed to be at least stay steady after reform, and we see that. So the reforms actually had some impact after the few years. What has happened, however, is that the number of people working, number of people contributing are a lot less today than was projected, right? And so if you make a forecast from 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and instead of economy going at 1.5%, say, you're going at 0.7%, jobs are not being created, and the NIS is losing year after year, as we saw here. The number of contributors is actually going down from almost 128,000 to 105,000. The challenge is the base, right? So the contribution income is not growing as fast as expected after reform was done. And so, like in your families, right, every now and again you have to take stock as to where we are and how are things going, right? Someone may lose a job in a family, and therefore income may be down for a while. You may get a bonus, so things change, right? And so in our context, things have changed. We're still getting older, we expected that. Fertility rates have been about where they were for the last 15, 20 years. We expected that. The economy we didn't expect to remain this low and for growth to be that small. And so the idea for going forward now, why we don't have in the report the effect of certain solutions, and I'll jump to this slide now, is we need to hear from you first. We need to hear from Barbados. What structure, what type system, what age, how generous should NIS really be? Right? And then so after we hear these ideas from you, And we heard many ideas today so far about compliance, about systems speaking to one another, about good design, and all those things. If we as Barbadians believe that every self-employed person, whether it be a vendor, a lawyer, or a doctor, needs to pay contributions before driving a ZR van, and the government does that, we can't have people screaming out 2 years later saying, my sister can't drive bus because, she has to pay and she can't afford it, right? So we have to make sure as a country that in the US, folks pay their taxes because Uncle Sam is going to get you, right? Maybe in the Caribbean, and Barbados is not alone in this, this is across the region. Nobody has successfully done self-employed compliance. Nobody. But if you're serious about doing it, it comes with consequences, right? And that's why I mentioned at my end, we have to come up with some beliefs and some priorities for the reforms. What do we really, really want to achieve? And are we willing to abide by those things that are required for us to achieve those things? And one of which is the self-employed, that the coconut vendor, the doctor, the lawyer, the taxi driver cannot ply his trade if he doesn't pay. And he could pay it once in his license, probably pay it over a 12-month period. As the lady said, we have systems now. We can find different ways to do different things, right? Allow shopkeepers to take contributions. The same way Lime and Digicel have been able to let shopkeepers sell minutes. Find a way to let shopkeepers or rum shops sell NIS contributions, essentially, right? Let's make it simple so people, wherever they are, not having to go up to the office between 8 and 4 and 5 days a week, but find a way to meet them where they are with technology in your hands, in your phones, and pay contributions. So we have a system that everybody pays in and can be sustainable for the long term.
Respectfully, that I don't think you would answer the question, because my question was very specific to the impact that the increase in contributions and the retirement age had on the fund.
Right.
And I heard everything that you said. I understand everything that you said, but it did not specifically address the question which I asked. Because if we are going, the buzz out there is we want to raise the retirement age to 72. We just raised it to 65.
Mm-hmm.
How much impact did that have on the life of the fund? If it only had 1 year, how much will 72 have on the fund? And you didn't answer the question that I asked, and I appreciate everything that you just said. It doesn't mean that what you said wasn't worth it.
I got you. Mm-hmm. Right, so what I'd say is that, the reforms was one variable in the mix. I mentioned the economy. So we had a positive, hopefully, from the reforms, more contributions coming in, less benefits going out. But the economy and real life happened so that the number of contributors going in has decreased so much more to offset whatever benefits there were from reforms, right? And so in the report, we can see in the chart some effects of reforms. There's no real number as to how many years it gave us or how many years the economy be negative has given us. But it's offsetting circumstances have happened.
Good night, everyone. My name is Wiggins. I have some solutions to help in terms of the fund. Some may have been mentioned already. I know one has been mentioned, where we stop governments from having access to NIS funds. NIS funds are funds that I put there. So government should not have free access. And when I say free access, let me explain. Chairman and deputy chairman, both of you I blame for some of this debacle. Because you should have said no to government when they come. But you know what? It will cost you your jobs. Because Don Marshall, when he said no, they replace him and give us someone else that tell them yes. You got a backbone. Don't be spineless jellyfish. 2, government needs to repay every cent that they take from NIS, whether in cash or gold bars. One of the two. 3, we, the contributors to the fund, want to take both the chairman and the deputy from being compromised. So you should not have no rights to give approval for any money going out to investment unless me, the contributor, my money, you put something, you send out, say, this is what we want to invest in, and you tell me vote if I agree. You give me everything I need to know. Don't let me go and dig and find that you tell lies. And I will say, yes, I think this is a good investment. This is the reason why I think it's a good investment. You have my blessing. But tell me, NIS invest $60 million in a 4 season. That ain't nothing for them to invest in. They ain't getting no return on investment. You got 2 buildings up there that NIS build. What return on investment they get here when government sit here down in the offices? What return on investment they get here? I want to tell me that when making good decisions when it comes to investment, I say no. I say no. Now, the lady made an interesting point there, and I agree with her. I'm trying to remember what point she made. Can't remember that point. No, the next one. I think all the citizens of Barbados should do a class action lawsuit against the government and make them repay, as I said, every cent in gold bars or cash. You see the paper that government has NIS holding? Tell me, when I really think when they get back anything? They got pensioners crying now when they tell them they can get back the little money. When they decide, all right, let me buy the bonds, help Barbados, and then can get back my return for my pension so I can live good. Well, they got a lot of pensions out there suffering because of government paper. That needs to stop. So, gentlemen, chairman, and when they got backbones to tell the government no going forward, that is what I want to know. And increasing the age is a no-no. You need to bring in younger people into the system who can work longer. When I hit sick, I would like to retire all right now. And that's the truth. I would like to retire all right now, and that is the truth. You think the average lifespan, I hear that the deputy said is 80. I disagree with you, sir. The average lifespan anybody is given is 70 years. I would like that when I retire, I got 15 years of good enjoyment for retirement. I am not working to no 67, nor no 76, nor no 72. I would like to retire at 55, but that ain't possible neither. So I take the 65. Increasing the payments, not the issue. That will not help either. Because we did that back in the day and said, oh, it can help. It help? No. You know why? When they're using the excuse that people falling out of the system, that's the issue. I would like to know from the actuary, because you're the 20 years in the business, how much money government take out the NIS and they pay back. I want every cent. Government need to pay back me money, and you need to put that as one of your recommendations. But sir, you look your job and you want to keep getting the paper roll. Don't do that.
Thank you, ma'am. I think there are a few things I would say. I think in governance terms, if the chair and deputy chair do not follow the guidelines that are laid down in the investment policy statement of the NIS, yeah, they should walk away or they should be sacked. Certainly that would be my attitude. And if, as has been the case in the past, that the decision is imposed on them, they then might want to think to themselves, what am I actually doing on this board? If even though I say don't do it, it gets done. You talked about the approvals of investments. I don't want to misunderstand you. I think you were saying you would like to have a voice in that. I just want to say at the moment, the NIS has a dedicated investment unit. I think there are 4 people and 1 more to join who are highly qualified. They are professionals. They scour the market for investments. They analyze them, and they present the papers to the board. So the board is not going around choosing these investments. And I think it would be a bit unwieldy to have citizens actually vote on whether they want to improve a project or not without the necessary financial training to make a good assessment. If in retrospect, when the reporting is done and these things continually do not work out, well then you should have recourse to say that investment unit is actually not doing its job. More broadly, we have to invest. It's very important we have to do it properly. You know, we have to have professionals in there to actually make the assessments and do it properly. I think I heard, I'm not sure if it was you or the previous lady referred to Four Seasons. I'm going to say the money that NIS put into Four Seasons was $9 million. And at the time of the debt restructuring, it was all repaid by the Ministry of Finance. NIS did not lose money on that particular deal. You also mentioned the property portfolio. Property portfolio in the NIS is worth about $330 million. At the moment, the gross yield is over 8%. I can't give you the net yield because I'm still trying to find out what it is, but 8% gross is pretty good. I'm fairly certain that a lot more can be done on the cost side so the real yield isn't below 6%. But I'm afraid I can't give you those numbers tonight because I don't have them. I think I'll hand over to the actuary now because there are a couple of things I think he would like to say.
Yeah, there's one question about how much money government has borrowed and how much they have paid back or not paid back. And so the NIS does not have audited statements, but every year the actuary, well, every 3 years, the actuary comes in and gets what Ms. Tudor mentioned were internal accounts. I know. I'm going back. So the NIS has, since I've been around, always had a very reliable listing of investments, all the assets it owns. Government, well, fixed deposits, treasury bills, government Barbados bonds, properties, equities overseas, and so on, right? So we've always relied on that investment listing. So government has borrowed money over the time, and most of the bonds have rolled over. And for the first time in 2018 was when the NIS actually did, government restructured, and instead of owing NIS $3.9 billion, they ended up owing them $2.9 billion. It's like $1 billion was lost in debt restructuring for the NIS. So that was the first time that I'm aware of, right, that the government had not either paid back or will not be paying back any money to the NIS that they borrowed in the past. And that was about net $1 billion in total for all five funds, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is that investments come with risk, and it's a job of the investment management team to assess each opportunity. Some of them will do well. So for example, on the stock market in the US, last year would have been a fantastic year. So far this year, it's going to be a down year, right? But over the long period, equities tend to outperform other investments. And so when you're in big money business, for lack of a better word of saying it, right, there's going to be some good, there's going to be some bad. But overall, if you go in making informed decisions by doing research properly, assessing each investment opportunity with the risk and the rewards, you should come out on top most of the times. And if you look at the graph in the report that shows the investment curve, investment yield historically, it's been very good. The investment returns of the NIS have been very good over time, averaging over 5%. They were over 6% for almost every year between 83, 84, and up to 2015. Over 6%, right? Most of the government bonds. So in terms of the investments themselves, for the most part, they've been good. Having too many eggs in the government basket came back to haunt the NIS 4 years ago with debt restructuring. But as I mentioned earlier, debt restructuring really was a loss for NIS, right? A savings for taxpayers. So it essentially made Barbadian taxpayers cost neutral. And the goal of debt restructuring, I believe, was to make Barbados stronger. And so hopefully that pans out. And every dollar that the government owes NIS, it's now about 2-point-something billion. Whenever they mature, whenever they become due, they can pay them back. That's the anticipation, that's the expectation.
I know you try to explain, but all the fluff, you still ain't explain it properly. And the buildings, I'm not talking about NIS holding. Yes, buildings have value, but I want to know, does government actually pay rent every month to NIS for renting out all these buildings? Do they actually pay the rent to NIS, or is it done physical cash, or is it done by government paper?
Well, you know, I think Deputy Chair could answer it better than I can, but I'll give you my answer. Then Deputy Chair can give you his.
Okay.
In my view, one of the best things that ever happened to this country was the IMF program. And the answer to that is why? Because it imposed upon us fiscal discipline. Mm-hmm. When I joined the NIS board, mm-hmm. the Transport Board owed money. Mm-hmm. The National Housing owed money. Mm-hmm. Other statutory corporations owed money. Mm-hmm. But you know what the IMF said? Mm-hmm. The IMF said, you're not going to get another drawdown unless everybody brings the payments up to date. And you know what happened since then? We at the NIS are being paid on a monthly basis. And there are times, yes, when there are certain statutory bodies who do not pay. Very simple. You call up the Ministry of Finance and you say, this statutory body owes us 2 months rent or 2 months contributions. And you know what happens? We get it. So yes, currently I can assure you that we are getting paid, and I think I could be wrong. I know the IMF program is coming to an end soon, and perhaps we may go into another one. I do not know. But the point is, fiscal discipline for the entire country of Barbados, in my view, was the best thing that ever happened to Barbados.
Okay, glad to hear that. You want
I'm very glad you asked that question, because we actually had the same question on a call today from Walter Blackman, you may know, who's a Brass Tacks host, asking specifically about the what I call the coupon payments on our bonds. So I'll start with your question. Yeah, government, those properties that are tenanted by government departments pay in cash. They have to pay in cash under the BERT program. The bond portfolio, which is about 2.1 billion out of the 3.9 billion, yields 8% at the moment, is paid in cash. You know, I will say as an aside that 8% sounds great, but I think we would look at diversifying that in all sincerity, because we still have too much money in those bonds, although it's paid in cash at the moment. It's just prudent to lower the risk. And the final point, I think I missed this earlier, you talked about arrears and money owed. At the time of the debt restructure, the government before owed 469 million in arrears. All of that was cleared in the debt restructure. So I hope that answers your question, ma'am.
Okay. I heard someone mention the inspectors. One of the failings of NIS is I'm not sure if it's the inspectors, I don't know if you have a team, but I feel you need a team to go out there, or if it's every month or every 2 months, and say to businesses, hey, you need to pay your national insurance, and you have until whatever date. After that is 5%, or we come in and you should be able to seize the business and tell the employees, run the business, pay up, and when you're done, and when all the money is paid, the owners can get back the business. That needs to happen, because you have too many employers in Barbados not paying, and is affecting the workers. Now, one of my suggestions was government wrote off VAT. VAT that I and you pay when we go into businesses. It seemed that central government didn't want that money. But instead of writing it off, what they should have done was to tell the businesses you have to pay because it's not coming out of your coffers. It's coming directly from the citizens. Take that money and by some law that they usually do, transfer it into the NIS fund. That's what they should have done. Because if they don't want it for central government, I'm sure NIS could use the money. So I would like the government of Barbados and Mayor Amar Motley, I know you are listening, reverse that decision to write off all that VAT and bring it back in. Even let the people play a little slowly and get to NIS. Boost back up the fund. This thing of writing off money that I pay as a hard-earned citizen needs to stop. That billion that Mayor write off because of that restructuring, that needs to be paid. I don't care, that my hard-earned money. If I was a millionaire, trust me, I would sue this government. Because that's my money, that's thieving my money under my nose in clear sight. One of the other things, I pay NIS, and I got all my pay slips from the time I work. When I go to NIS, when it's time for my retirement, I tell them how much money I put in there, and I want to know how much money when they gave me. So if I put in, I want to make sure I get back my portion. And I don't think you should be looking at me and telling me, you can't get nothing. Hello, that's going to be war though. Because I want my money that I put in there. So don't come and tell me I can't get none. That's my money I work for that put in there. Or not give me all my money in hand and tell me you got a choice if you want to put in the fund or not. And if I make the choice not to put in the fund, I should know I can't get no money when I reach retirement age. If I put in the fund, I know I'm entitled to my money. So I want the highest fundamental is to stop government from having access to NIS funds. That's the highest fundamental. And these investments in certain things, I feel should be a no. Some things don't give you no return on investment. And it should be, government in hand, what government got right building hotels? Left that for the private sector. Concentrate on the education system that needs fixing as well.
Thank you, ma'am. May I just say we've got about 10 minutes left. If anyone else would like to come with a question.
Good night. My name is Dwight. And well, my first thing is that I saw the two options perpetuated by the media, which would have been the increase in the pension age, and the second one was reducing the maximum pension, which I think both are uncreative. All right. The first one, we talk about increasing the pension age, we also got to look at unemployment. I saw from the figures that it was 30,000 people less working than before. So if you increase the pension age, you also stop the younger people who want to work and who can contribute for much longer to actually work and contribute to the fund. This is in itself a multifaceted problem that NIS is facing, and I don't think NIS alone should be in this. Not only just cabinet, there should be someone from the health sector here, because if you're allowing me to work to 72, how effective will it be at 72? How effective will you be at 72, Mr. Actuary? How effective will you be at 72, ma'am? Some persons might get dementia, you might not be able to hear well, all of a sudden you're going to hear in it. Being efficient also has to do something to do with it. So we need to, should never be an option in the first place. Given the fact that in your earlier presentation, you also stated that these measures were taken before. So we have to come with something new and a bit more creative. Now, one of the major issues we have here is that the population is declining and it is aging, which means that it's going to affect the health sector, which means that government is going to pull more money from taxes and we're going to be in the same loop again. So it's basically one big loop. So this cannot be the answer. You want? Go ahead.
I just wanted to say somewhere along the line, it seems to me that people feel that we have put forward an answer. We have not put forward an answer. There may be solutions that we have put forward, when you have a problem, you put your options on the table. Those were options that have been made. But really and truly, I've listened, and I'm speaking for myself now, rather than the board of the NIS or anything, because we have not yet discussed it. But presently, I think I've listened to Derek, and Derek said it earlier. There is, and a lot of people coming up here said it earlier, those solutions of raising contributions and raising age, we have heard from you all tonight that those solutions will not work. Right, so take those solutions aside. There is and I've heard that there is the other solution, and perhaps it has not been expressed as forcefully as it could be. And one of those solutions really is changing the structure of the benefits and the payments. And I want to read from this article. I think it appeared in the Sunday Sun by Professor, they got me here, I can't read too good in this light, but I'll try my best to read it. Professor Justin Robinson, a former chairman of the NIS board. And the question was, and that is the question to him from the article yesterday was this: how do we ensure that we don't walk this path again? And that's the question that the lady in the red up there was saying, and a lot of people have been saying, how do we have done things in the past, it didn't work. And you know what his answer was? His answer is answers in terms of ensuring that we don't walk this road again, soon again. There may be need to take a look at the structure of the benefits. So therefore, and Derek has said it tonight, at least on 2 occasions, but perhaps not, as I said before, not forcefully. The solution, as I sit down here, speaking for myself, is that we don't want to walk this path again, is that we're going to have to look at the whole structure of payments, contributions, and benefits. That lady in the yellow top said when she's 67 or when she's 65 or when she's time, when she's 65, right? She wants to go to NIS and she wants to know how much money she's paid in. Well, right, and you want to make sure you're getting your money back out. Right, that's the point. So what she has suggested there is perhaps one of the solutions to the whole situation. Am I right on that, Derek? Yeah. Right. So that's one of the solutions. So what I'm saying is that yes, I agree with people, with you all in here tonight, that walking the same path again, raising contributions, that's not going to work. We have to look at the structural change. You rest assured that when I say a structural change, that Derek has come with the figures tonight. The truth about it is that the present, like anything else, the present structure of the NIS is perhaps, we have perhaps outgrown that. That act was passed in 1967. This is 56 years later. Everything in Barbados has changed. So that the answer, the solutions are, we are here listening to you all, and we listen to what everybody says, and then we have to translate that, what you all say, into policy.
Hey, well, that's not the only problem I have here. You know, we only get one.
No, but I was just addressing that issue.
That's fine. I agree with you completely. Well, we will wait to see if we do what we always do, which is the definition of madness. But I will wait to see. I hopefully in my lifetime that we do something different. But so my second problem was that that is noted is that if we do have a declining population, we have an aging population, and it will cause you all to spend more money. Well, use more of the sickness benefit. It is correct. That's the correct term for the fund. No. What you all pay? Old age pension. Pardon? No, you all also pay sick benefits, correct?
Right.
Right. So I'm saying is that if we have an aging and declining population, as populations age, you will spend more money on health care, which means more people will still be out, and you'll be spending more money in the sickness benefit anyway.
But it's small. It's small compared to the old age pension.
It's smaller.
It's very small.
Yeah, but you check the age of the 72. Well, in theoretically, we check the age of the 72. We still have that problem again. We become more. We multiply tenfold. All right, so if the only way to increase a population is two ways: natural increase and migration. None of the two of them will work because the economic situation is not conducive to people procreating. So that is an issue in itself where we have to get the economy sorted. So if we're going to do that, I think it is time that, as what he said, it's multifaceted. We need government then to invest in some other area. Now, I don't believe in government being in everything as well. We see the Four Seasons Project, other things in the private sector, but it is time for government to facilitate the creation either of a new industry coming in, a new business, or just paving the way for something else to come in to, for one, create more employment so you all can get, well, you're 30,000 people that are being unemployed. People can feed their families and then have the enjoyment to procreate. You can't procreate when you're broke. You can't feel comfortable. You can't feed children when they're hungry or when you're hungry. So we need to have, as I said, we need to look at it from many different angles.
I translate what you have said, and that reminds me of the sparrow calypso. You can't make love on hungry belly.
I remembered something I had not spoken about. I would like to think that the board at the NIS has the best interests of the people of Barbados at heart. To that end, I believe that the board members of the NIS should declare the other boards they serve on to make sure that there are no conflicts with the money that is going out of the NIS. So I believe that every board member should declare the boards they serve on, and any board member being elected should have to declare the boards they serve on before they are elected.
Okay, I'd like to make this the last question for the evening. We've run past time, so please come forward and ask.
Good night. My name is Chantal Aline, and I don't necessarily get involved with this kind of thing, but as a young person and hearing of all of the possibilities of changes that might come about, I'm a little scared. And I am an entrepreneur as well. Over the last couple of years, switched over. I'm a mother of 4, so I think I significantly contributed to the economy. Okay? But my thing is, I've been hearing from the time I have been going to school, right back down to the Minister of Education at that time, saying how we need to increase the population. We need the women, in layman terms, to breed. We need more children. But really and truly, I didn't plan to have 4. I ended up with 4. And I will not change anything because I am blessed. Every time I got one, I was given all the opportunities that I can be able to provide. I am one also that was very fortunate within the NIS scheme with my husband as well, in terms of the maternity leave, sickness benefits, whatever the case may be. When I switched over to entrepreneurship, I was like clueless. But it's certain things in which it is that as a citizen, you know that you should or should not do, especially when it is that you're going to new ventures. And I'm saying that to say, like, when it is that we try to get, with the banks and all these things, all these things have to be provided in order for you to get through. But from the time we had the COVID hit, and as I said, it's my husband and I who are entrepreneurs. So now, obviously, we weren't getting anything from the NIS. I had to make sure during the shutdown to pay NIS for my employees to make sure that they can get their contributions. Because how I see them, if they can't eat, I'm not going to be able to eat. But my husband and I, when Mia and Maura Martley had implemented the $500 for the employers for each person for either the 2 to 3 months that we were on shutdown. that was nothing. And obviously, as a household of 6, it's hard to say that you got dipping and you still got paid for your employees. No, I know there are employers out there who does not pay, and that's very unfortunate. But another point in which was mentioned tonight that I think that should be really looked at is education. A lot of people out there still really do not understand or know how important the NIS contributions are for them in the long run, because of a lot of horror stories that they hear people having troubles either getting, or they don't know what they're going to get when they get this age. And now this whole thing with the pension plan probably will be depleted. It is scary. I am at the stage, if I had the option of the money which I pay to NIS, I would put in a separate account to guarantee that when it is I get to my pension age, I have money. Because at this stage, what y'all talking about tonight, I don't even know, or I am not comfortable to say, in the next 12 to 15 years, where I still have to be working, all the money that I paid in, whether for myself or my employees, there be any benefit to me. It's all right to say that the government shouldn't do this, the government shouldn't do that. But at the end of the day, it's not fair that all of these things happen within the NIS and they come to the people of Barbados, who especially pays to tell them in 12 to 15 years they might not get nothing. It's not fair. And then another thing is, when y'all open and said that we are at the stage with COVID kind of like easing off, more or less. I see on a night businesses closing at 8 o'clock. If it is that NIS want more contributions, people gotta get paid more. In order for people to get paid more, they could work the longer times. I find with this COVID, a lot of businesses take this opportunity to cut down people's pay and not extend back the time and shutting down the country. When something to drive about after 9 o'clock, the road dead. Ain't nothing that you can leave work and really and truly get to go and do, even especially a supermarket closing at 8 o'clock. And the only way for people to pay a little more is to extend the time. Years ago, we was even saying why it is that we can't structure Barbados in a way to work half a day, like make more things that can be relevant to 24 hours and extend the payment time of people to pay more into the NIS as well. And then this whole catastrophe fund y'all having, I don't even, like, I really would like to know what that catastrophe fund covers. And then on the other aspect that I would like to speak about is the maternity leave. Now, obviously being a mother of 4, I can tell you, it is not attractive for a lot of Bajan women to get children in this economy. It's getting harder and harder. And then you got to deal with some employers that ain't want to pay, want to find that as a reason to cut you off from paying, to come back to work. And then you're going through the NIS, probably only to get 12 weeks for a maternity leave. You got to make it more attractive. It's just like in any business. If you give some, you get back some. So if you extend maternity leave in a way of like 4 to 6 months or something to give the parents more time, you might get encouraged to people to bring more children, because you just got to give to get. That's my first thing.
So thank you for those comments. And I'll just say one thing before we leave. Under the worst case scenario, if the fund ever is depleted, it does not mean no more NIS. NIS will still collect contributions every week, every month, to pay whatever benefit it can. Okay, so don't think that the projection that NIS the fund may be depleted means that all your money that you put in so far is for naught, right? And the reason we're here is to kick off that discussion, consultation, to save the NIS, right? And so what we heard a while ago was a good example of a young lady who's benefited from the scheme. NIS was there when it's her turn to get. And based on what I've heard tonight, I'm sure it's my last time speaking probably, so I'll jump on the slide on the screen. These 4 ingredients, we heard every single one of them repeatedly tonight. We heard about governance, about politicians not putting their hand in the cookie jar, taking NIS funds. We heard about weak board members, right? We heard about management not doing statements on time, right? All those things need to be fixed. We heard about systems. The registry, someone dies yesterday, the family comes in tomorrow, NIS knows in 5 minutes. Systems.
The lady who wanted a central database.
Right. Systems to allow self-employed people to pay where they are. They go to the rum shop, they go to the store, you know, or on their phone, they had a good day, a good vendor day, a good fishing day, a good taxi day, send $100 to NIS with no forms, no due date, just flexible, right? That is good design and systems. Good design, we talk about 55 and 2022. Let's make sure that we look at where we are today, right? What's available to us, what's important to us, and design NIS the way it should be designed today. And finally, the economy, right? Out of our hands. But I think if each of us puts our best foot forward, right? Give a fair day's work and the economy, we talk about employers and so on, encourage people to come back home, right? Grow the population, right? And attract investment, and all these 4 ingredients can come together for a stronger NIS.
Okay, I just want to thank everybody for coming out. I got one correction I need to make because I received a message from DFE as I was saying it, and it's that the $9 million for the 4 seasons is to be repaid upon the sale of that property. So it is $9 million and it's not yet in the bank. But I want to sum up first by thanking everybody who did come out, who did submit some ideas. There are a few things I think is worth re-emphasizing. When the actuary has put up these options, they're options. No decision has been made. Let me say that again. No decision has been made. These are a range of proposals that we want feedback on. I'm very glad that I think it was the last question from Chantal, she spoke. I thought both in terms of fear about the future of the NIS, but also what it had done for her in the sense of responsibility that she felt in paying her employees. And we have heard quite a few people say, well, I just want my money back, I want to opt out. But we haven't heard that many people say, well, this is what the NIS has actually done for me. So it's an easy example, the first one, but there are many that are more individual and personal. But just one example in 2020, the unemployment benefit that was paid out to stop people getting absolutely destroyed by the pandemic when the economy ground to a standstill. In a normal year, I think it's 2021, excuse me, normal year 2019 and 2020, that fund expects to pay out between $43 and $49 million. The next year it paid out 3 times that, $147 million. That was the NIS being what they say in their jingles, a lifeline. And that's the role it's played historically. And that's why when people say, I want to opt out, we ask them to recognize that for every choice there's a consequence. If you want to have a society where it's every man for himself, that's what opting out will lead to. If that's the choice, we can do it that way. But this is not what we're recommending. So once again, thank you very much. Our view, I hope we've managed to express it adequately, is that we do have a big structural problem. I call it the shoes earlier. You know, our benefits have outrun our capacity to pay them. This is the fundamental issue, but there are other very, very important issues that everyone here who spoke has raised, and we're looking at all of those and we're collecting the information that we can. So thank you very much and good evening.